Well, thank you, Peter, for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. Thanks, Shane, for having me here. Thanks to the whole PBC crew for having me here. It's been a wonderful stay so far. A few more days to go before I head back out. So I got here on Sunday, which was July 3rd here, I think, yeah. And then so it's a holiday the next day in the United States. July 4th is Independence Day in the United States, and I got to spend it in the Queen's Dominion, which is sort of a rather ironic event. But anyway, nonetheless, kind of happy to be here. I'm going to be talking about leading through organizational crisis. And to kick us off, I want to start by talking about an incident that happened a few years ago in the United States. This is with Southwest Airlines. So Southwest is a domestic mainly. Now I think they technically do some international now. Mainly domestic carrier in the United States, well known for safety. Until this incident, they had never had a single person die in any of their aviation activities. One did die in this incident, but what I want you to listen for here is the pilot and how the pilot, Tammy Jo Schultz, responds to what is clearly a crisis situation. So what happened is a fan blade broke off and blew up the engine blew up, and one of the windows came open, and a passenger sitting near that window, unfortunately, did not make it. But think about the situation on that plane. Imagine what it would be like for you to be on that plane and what the other people would be doing, what the flight crew must be doing while all this is happening. And then listen to what the pilot has to say. So hopefully this starts.
Southwest 1380 has an engine fire descending.
Southwest 1380, you're descending right now?
Yes, sir. We're single engine descending, have a fire, number 1.
Alright, Southwest 1380, okay, where would you like to go to? Which airport?
We're looking at Philly.
Southwest 1380. I understand your emergency. Let me know when you want to go in.
Yeah, we have a part of the aircraft missing, so we're going to need to slow down a bit.
Southwest 1380, speed is your discretion. Maintain at any altitude above 3,000 feet, and you let me know when you want to turn base.
All right, down to 3,000. Southwest 1380, like to start turning inbound.
Southwest 1380, just start turning southbound there. There's a Southwest 737 on a 4-mile final. We'll be turning southbound. Start looking for the airport. It's off to your right and slightly behind you there. And altitude is your discretion. Use caution for the downtown area. Advise you maintain at about 2,200 for the MVA.
Okay, could you have the medical meet us there on the runway as well? We've got injured passengers.
Injured passengers, okay. And is your airplane physically on fire?
No, it's not on fire, but part of it's missing. They said there was a hole and someone went out.
I'm sorry, you said there was a hole and somebody went out? Southwest 1380, it doesn't matter. We'll work it out there. So the airport's just off to your right. Report it in sight, please.
Southwest 1380, airport's in sight.
Southwest 1380, runway 27 left, clear to land. Southwest 1380, right turn when you're able. If you want to stop wherever you need to, is fine.
Thank you. We're going to stop right here by the fire truck. Thanks, guys, for the help.
Okay, so first time I heard that, I thought, wow. This pilot, so calm in this situation, just is crazy, right? This doesn't happen very often. So I thought, who is this? Who is Tammy Jo Schultz? And so I looked her up. She was one of the first female fighter pilots in the U.S. Navy. For a long time, the U.S. military didn't allow women or females to be in the military. So she was one of the first female pilots in the U.S. Navy, reached the rank of lieutenant commander. She's served during Operation Desert Storm, and she retired to become a civilian pilot for Southwest Airlines. She actually wasn't supposed to be flying the plane that day. Her husband is also a pilot. He was supposed to be flying that day, but he was sick or something, so she took his shift. So in my mind, pretty fortunate for the passengers that she was flying. I mean, you could imagine, not every pilot would be quite so calm and so concerned about the people on that plane. And that's going to be a critical component that I'm going to come to at the end of this talk. So Another person you might have heard of, Gennaro Arma. This was a couple of years ago when COVID broke out. He was the captain of the Diamond Princess cruise ship, this cruise ship that was stuck, basically, quarantined off the coast of Japan for about a month. You know, when you go on a cruise ship, it's supposed to be really nice and wonderful. And I don't get the sense that that's what it was like on this cruise. It sounded like it was pretty miserable. And he's largely credited with helping get the passengers in the crew through this situation. So what we're really talking about today is what does it take to effectively lead through a crisis? And I'm going to be presenting some research that we've done, that my staff has done, looking at who effectively leads through a crisis. But this is the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. So I want to set the stage by talking about what we actually know about crises in general. And the first thing is that crisis is common. It's really popular today to talk about VUCA. You hear this all the time, oh, that the world is volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous. And I put it up here because one time I had my wife come to one of these lectures and somebody kept saying VUCA, VUCA, VUCA over and over. And she goes, what is VUCA? My wife doesn't work in this industry, right? So there you go, just in case you don't know. In case you brought your spouse, we're here to educate the whole person. But the world has always been this way, right? Imagine living in the African savanna or the Australian outback. I mean, 10,000 years ago. It seems like things would be pretty volatile, right? Pretty uncertain, not really sure what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So we might think of history and things as being simpler, but it's always been complex, right? So there's always crisis, it's always complicated. Every organization will face a crisis at some point, and it's the leader's responsibility to deal with those crises in most cases, and typically the leader's legacy is defined by how they handle that crisis. And so, of course, leadership is critical, right? So, Peter talked a lot about leadership and the importance of leadership in his talk a few minutes ago. There's lots of data showing that leadership is related to organizational success. We have a bunch of data suggesting that leadership accounts for about 25 to 35% of a company's financial results. Take publicly traded companies in the U.S., about 25 to 35% of their financial results are related to who's the CEO. That's the number 2 rank. The number 1 rank is what industry you're in. So if you're in oil or tech, that tends to do well. But second is who's in charge. All right, so who's in charge really matters. Handling a crisis is just a part of being a leader. Part of being the pilot on that plane means being able to handle a crisis when it comes up. And so obviously organizations need effective leaders to overcome crises. So leadership is really critical, but I think it's important to talk about what we mean by leadership. And by we, I mean Hogan, right? So what does Hogan mean when we talk about leadership? And one problem is the academic definition of a leadership is terrible. And you can understand why that's the case. If you were saying, hey, I'm new to the field of leadership and I want to study leadership, I want to know what it is, who's good at it, understand something about what it means to be a leader, where would you start? Well, it seems really simple. Let me just go find a bunch of leaders and measure things about them. And that's how 90% of academic studies on leadership are done. Let's go find people who are leaders and measure them. And we go, that's leadership. That's what leadership is. The problem is this. There's a huge selection bias by studying people at the top of large, hierarchical, bureaucratic, mostly male-dominated organizations. Who gets to the top of those kind of organizations? There's a lot of guesses that are good guesses. And the deeper answer is politicians. People who are good at playing organizational politics, who can understand the rules of the game in that kind of an organization, get to the top of those organizations. Another way of looking at it is like this. What do Jack Welch and Jeffrey Immelt have in common? What do Bob Iger and Michael Eisner have in common? All 4 were CEOs, right? CEOs of GE, CEOs of Disney. They had very different results for success. Right? Bob Iger was largely considered very successful at Disney. Jack Welch, for some period of time, was considered really successful. Do you remember this? He was Man of the Year or something, Business Leader of the Year on Time Magazine. Do you know what the staff called Jack Welch? They called him Neutron Jack. They called him that because they said everywhere he stepped, no grass would ever grow again. So he wasn't really well liked, and then it turns out he basically completely ruined GE with the kinds of things he was doing with GE Capital. So the point is, getting to the top of an organization is not the same thing as being an effective leader. A more local example, you all, I'm sure, are familiar with Jack Trong. The PBC group has talked to me about him as well. Just another case of the ability to get to the top of an organization is not necessarily related to your ability to lead that organization effectively. So we really need a different definition of leadership. And I think it really helps to start with our roots, to start with human origins. The individual human is squishy. That's what I like to refer to them as, squishy. We are not very strong. We don't have a strong bite. We're not very fast. We don't have sharp claws. We don't have sharp teeth. Left alone on the African savanna or in the Australian outback, we're kind of a tasty snack for some other creature. But when we get together, well, we've seen the results. We are the most invasive, destructive, powerful force the Earth has ever seen. We seem pretty well on our way to actually destroying the whole thing, so that'll be nice. Actually, we probably won't. We won't destroy Earth. Earth's been here for a really long time. Earth's going to be fine. We're just going to destroy ourselves, so we got that going for us. That's a bright spot for your rainy day. The point is, we have to live in groups because otherwise we don't do so well on our own. But when we get together as groups, we become really effective, right? So we're group living animals. In human history, the archaeological record suggests that warfare was pretty much constant. There's that group over there, this group over there, they got their stuff, I want to get their stuff, they want to come get our stuff. And we're fighting, and whoever wins, they get your stuff, but they also eat you. Cannibalism was quite common, right? So, lucky for you, your ancestors were at the dinner table, not on it, right? So you're still here. And the thing is that, right, when they come for you, when that other group comes for you, unlike today, they're not bringing their lawyers, right? They're coming with cruel intentions. So warfare was constant. What that meant is we have to coordinate our effort. The group who was better at coordinating was going to win the war. Who's in charge of coordinating group efforts? Leaders. So leadership has been critical for group survival for a really long time. And what it really involves you doing is convincing people to put aside their selfish goals for a little while and to work together to accomplish some bigger task. And that's true today, right? So that's true. That was true thousands of years ago, but it's also true today in our organizations. Okay, maybe there's less killing and less blood, but although maybe not so much. You all are familiar with the news, right? So maybe not. Point is, leadership is really critical, whether we're talking about businesses, whether we're talking about warfare, whether we're talking about athletics. And we should change the definition of leadership to be about group effectiveness. Leadership should be a resource for the group, not a source of privilege for the leader. And Peter talked about this in his slides as well. If we put this definition together, if we look at leadership in terms of the group's results, the literature on leadership actually starts to make a lot more sense. So here's our definition of leadership at Hogan. It is about the ability to build and maintain a high-performing team. And so, of course, you judge leaders, and I think this was in Peter's slide, you should judge a leader by their team's results. Unfortunately, most places don't do this. And again, most studies on leadership ignore this. They just study who's at the top. Okay, so different definition of leadership. When we talk about leadership at Hogan, we're talking about the ability to build and maintain a high-performing team, to beat the competition, to do better than others as a group. So the question is, who is best at leading through a crisis? And I promise you, I'm going to get to an answer. But first, I'm going to suggest that we actually know what we're talking about when we talk about this thing. Everybody has an opinion on leadership. You can go to Amazon, you can go to a bookstore, and I already don't remember the name of it. Is it a D sounding? Dymocks? Okay. Dymocks. Sorry, we don't have Dymocks in the U.S. You can go there, and you can go to the leadership section, right? And you can find tons of books. There's tons and tons of books. Peter mentioned some data earlier from some of these survey companies. Gallup does surveys all the time, and in their surveys, something like, Peter mentioned 30% of people are disengaged. About 60% of people list the most miserable aspect of their life is their immediate supervisor. There's actually some really fascinating data on this. About 12% of the people in the UK, this was a survey done a couple of years ago, said that they actively fantasize on a daily basis about killing their boss. Right? So leadership is the problem. And we have all these books. There's all this information, right? You would think we'd be good at it. You go and read these books, but we're not. Right? Well, look, we've been studying leadership at Hogan for 30-something years, and we've been studying it in conjunction with the notion of organizational effectiveness, that is team outcomes. How did the team actually do? So these are what the data actually have to tell us about leading through a crisis. Now, Peter mentioned leading through influence. I think that was the term earlier. Yeah. So this is where I get to stand here, I get to fly to Australia, and I get to give this talk and pretend like I did all this research, but really I have this awesome staff that did it all, and they sent me the results. I'm like, okay, cool, I'll talk about it. So I'm gonna come to that in a second, but when I get to that, I want to point out two things. That personality predicts who leads and they predict how they lead. So who leads, this is a ton of research, right? This is who gets to the top of those organizations. We know personality predicts that. Tim Judge did a big meta-analysis some years ago, showed that there's about a 0.54 correlation between big five. If you take all the big five and you sort of do a regression analysis and you sum it all up, about a 0.54 correlation between personality and leadership rank in your company. So personality predicts who leads, but it also predicts how they lead. And that's what I'm going to be talking about here. So Peter already talked about this, so I'm not going to say anything about this. You're all certified, so you're familiar with these, so skipping over that. But I am going to jump into the MVPI a little bit briefly here. So these are the scales, just so you recognize them. I'm going to point out two that are actually associated with leading through a crisis. So what my research team did was they went to the literature on leading effectively through a crisis. There's actually a number of studies, about somewhere between 12 and 20. I don't remember the exact number. There's about that many studies on effectively leading through crisis. And they said, what are the behaviors, right, that they're talking about? What are the behaviors that leaders who lead through a crisis engage in that make them effective? Now, Peter mentioned our Hogan competency model. What's so cool about it is, we sometimes talk about it as a model, but it's really a library. It's more of a competency library. These are all of the possible competencies that exist. People come to us with competencies all the time. We already have them. Yeah, you might call it a different name, but we already have it. Our list is comprehensive. So we can look at these behaviors that are associated with effectively leading through a crisis, and we can map them to our competency model. So that's what we did. We said, okay, well, this is the behavior they say. What competency in our competency library matches that? And because we have tons of performance data. Again, did I mention my team's really awesome? We do these studies, we do studies all the time. We have more than 400 criterion-related validity studies. That means we measured personality, and then we measured performance on a whole bunch of possible performance outcomes, and we saw how they worked. What's really cool about that is we can map those performance outcomes to our competencies. So now we have performance on those competencies. We know which competencies matter for leading through a crisis from our literature review. And we can say, well, what are the personality characteristics of leaders who effectively lead through a crisis. So that's the analysis that I'm going to be showing you here. And we found that 2 from the MVPI predict effectively leading through a crisis. The first one is affiliation. We're going to talk about why here in a second. I'm just reminding you of what this is. And the second one is security. Security is about dealing with risk, comfort with risk. So a couple of things that we found in reviewing the literature on leading effectively through a crisis. Being connected with the people involved in the crisis. Showing them that you actually care, that you're part of their group too, is important. And that's where affiliation comes in. And the second part is the ability to deal with ambiguity, and that's where security comes in. People who are high on security struggle with ambiguity. People who are low on security are comfortable with ambiguity. In a crisis, we often don't know. We don't have all the information. We don't know what's going to happen next. People who are comfortable working in those situations handle crises much better. And so these are the actual correlations with performance data. Affiliation is positively correlated with performance in crisis situations, and security is negatively associated with performance in crisis situations. These are a couple of the sort of the summary of the behaviors that they want to see. In a crisis, you want to make people feel valued. Things are bad. I'm here. I care about you. And I'm prepared to make decisions. That's the other big part of the low security part, is the comfort with taking those risks. Saying, we don't know all the information right now, but we have to act. We can't wait. We have to accept some risks, and being able to take those smart risks is important. So that's the first part. HPI, which of the HPI are related to effectively leading through a crisis? Again, we found 2 scales that predicted performance in crisis situations. The first is adjustment. This is probably the least surprising, right? There's a crisis. Do you want someone who panics easily or someone who remains calm? Okay, right? So this one's going to be the obvious one. The second one is ambition. As Peter mentioned, ambition does predict a whole lot of things, so it's probably not a surprise that it predicts here. We'll talk about why it does here in a second. So things that we know people are looking for in a crisis: they want someone who can remain calm. Remember Tammy Jo Schultz, right? Remaining calm under pressure. You know, it's just an engine on fire, right? No big deal. Hole in your plane. Who can take charge and can confidently make those critical decisions. So that's where adjustment comes in, that remaining calm part. And then confidently making critical decisions, that's part of ambition. When you combine these two, you really get all of that together. These are some of the behaviors that we see that show up when people do this. One, they model behavior for others. Right? When it's a crisis and your leader's running around panicked, everybody else goes, oh, geez, maybe we should panic too. Maybe panic is the right thing to do, right? When the leader remains calm, everybody else can remain calm. And of course, they can adapt to changes, right? In a crisis situation like with COVID, remember, things are very fluid. We don't really know what's going to happen on a daily basis. Are we coming into the office or not? How are we going to continue business? Should we move to virtual for some of our products or some of our services? And finally, in terms of the dark side, what are the dark side characteristics most associated with leadership effectiveness? I'm going to break this down into probably 3 things that you're all familiar with. We know that the dark side comes out when we stop putting our best foot forward, when we stop managing our impression. So that can happen when we're in a leadership position and we're kind of comfortable. That can happen when nobody's really supervising us. But that can often happen when we're under stress. And that's what I'm going to be talking about here, because a crisis, no surprise, usually causes everyone to feel more stress. So under stress, how do people respond? Well, there's really 3 responses, and you're probably all familiar with these. We can run away, we can attack the problem, or we can befriend the problem. One way to think about this is that there's a colleague stressing you out at work. There's a colleague bothering you at work. how can I respond? One way is to run away. Oh, I'm not feeling so good. I'm feeling sick. I think I won't come in today. That's one option. Another option is to, what did I say yesterday? Poison their salad. It's a little dramatic. Probably something else you could do that's less deadly. But I can't think of any, which is bad. Hey, I'm so sorry I've offended you. How can we be friends? I want to get close to you, right? Those are really 3 responses to a stressful situation. And what we found in our review of the literature looking at effectively leading through a crisis is that it's really that first one that's a real problem. And so some of the tactics that we see when people move away, particularly in a crisis, is they do this. They downplay the size of the problem, or they even deny that it exists. So in the United States, we had a leader who, when COVID broke out, said, he said, well, this COVID thing, one day it's just going to disappear. It'll vanish. Poof. It'll be gone. Right? That's this. Right? That's denying the problem, ignoring the size of the problem. And what people want is someone who is realistic. They want them to say, okay, this is a problem. This is how big it is. They don't want someone who over-dramatizes it either, right? They want someone who can be realistic about the actual size of the problem. The moving away group here on the HDS really is about running away from the problem. That's sort of the excitable part, panicking and running away. The reserved part is denying, ignoring the problem. And the cautious part is the inability to make a decision, freezing up when it's critical. So when you sort of put this all together, we have a nice picture of what does it take to lead through a crisis. You need people who can remain calm, who can accurately evaluate the size of the problem, who can pull other people in. Hey, I care about you. I'm looking out for you. Who can make decisions quickly and effectively without perfect information. And you can get all of that with the MVPI, HPI, and the HDS. So the question really is, what can organizations do? And there's really 2 answers to this question. The first thing you can do is obviously have leaders in place who are good at handling a crisis, who have these personality characteristics, or who have developed the skills around these personality characteristics to handle a crisis. So that's done through selection. What do we know? Why would we do that through selection? Well, we know personality is highly stable, right? So if we select people with these characteristics, we're likely to get them. I like to mention this study because I think it's so cool. I'm also attached to the study because I was an author on it, but anyway. In the 1960s, there was a group of, there was a researcher, Jack Digman, was working at the University of Hawaii, and he had personality assessments given to teachers. So the teachers were assessing the kids in their classrooms, 3rd, 4th grade classrooms. The teachers were rating all the kids on these different personality characteristics. And Jack Digman was really into factor analysis, so he did a bunch of really boring factor analysis stuff and then didn't do anything with that. Well, actually, he was one of the founders of sort of the Big Five stuff, so maybe he kind of did do some stuff. But anyway, then he retired and he moved to Oregon, and he was hanging out with Lou Goldberg, who's another Big Five person. And they said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we found those people? And so they wrote a grant, and they got the grant, and then Jack Digman died. Sad. But Lou Goldberg still had this grant. He said, I guess I should go find these people since they gave me all the money. So they went and found a whole bunch of these people. Thousands of these people who had been assessed by their teachers. Their teachers had rated them. They found them. But 40 years later. Now these people are in their 40s and 50s. They brought them back to the Kaiser Permanente Hospital in Honolulu, and they did all kinds of medical tests and all kinds of other things with them. But one of the things they did was they interviewed them for 1 hour, and they videotaped these interviews. And one day, my colleague and I flew up to Oregon, and we were talking with the Lou Goldberg about these tapes, and they said, here, you can have them. We took them with us to California, and we gave them to a bunch of undergraduate students. We said, hey, watch these tapes and code for all their behaviors. And that's what they did. They coded all the behaviors, all the way people behaved in these interviews. And then we did the really cool part, which is we took those teachers' ratings of personality from when they're in 3rd and 4th grade, and we correlated them with their behavior as adults 40 plus years later. And the links were super strong. Went, whoa. So personality is really stable. That's the point here, right? Even little kids, what the teachers know about you stays the same even when you're an adult many years later. The best predictor of past future behavior is past behavior. Reputation is the sum of your past behavior. Our assessments measure reputation. I won't go into a long rant about why, because Peter tells me it takes too long, and he's right. Well-designed assessments like ours do measure reputation. And so if you want to find leaders who effectively lead through a crisis, use an assessment and hire those people who can effectively lead through a crisis. And again, crisis is coming. You think it's over, there'll be another one. I don't know if you heard, the RBA raised your rates again yesterday. I don't know if you heard, there's a train strike this morning, right? So, right, there's crisis all the time. The other thing we can do is, well, what if you already have leaders in place? Talent is at a sort of a shortage right now. I can't really just go find a new leader. I need to work with the leaders that I have. Well, we can develop those leaders. We can do that in a couple of ways. One of the things that I like to think about when it comes to leadership development is about Alice in Wonderland. Right, so Alice in Wonderland is the Disney adaptation of Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There by Lewis Carroll. There's a scene in the Disney adaptation where Alice comes to a fork in the road, and she's not sure which way to go. And the Cheshire Cat here appears, and she says, well, which way should I go? And the cat says, well, where are you going? And she says, I don't know. And he says, well, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Which is a funny line, but there's a corollary to personality, which is that if you don't know where you're at, you can't possibly know where to go either. Right? Like I'm in Sydney for the first time ever. I don't know where I'm at. I have no idea. Right? So I have to ask the hotel person, like, how do I get to the museum, right? So that helps because she can give me some awareness of where I'm at and where I need to go. So understanding where you're at begins with awareness, what we call strategic self-awareness, and you get that through a quality assessment, whether that's a personality assessment, 360 assessment. The point is you've got to get that awareness. So if you want to be better, more effective at leading through a crisis, you need to know, where do I actually stand on these characteristics? What might be some holes or weaknesses in my general tendencies towards dealing with a crisis? Okay, that's really going to be it for me. Here's the reality. Crisis is inevitable. It comes all the time. Leadership is critical. If you have an effective leader in place, you're going to be better at handling a crisis. And by the way, organizations that handled COVID really well are doing really well right now. And organizations that didn't handle it very well are not doing so well. So in many respects, crisis is an opportunity. If you have the right leaders in place, crisis is actually an opportunity for those organizations to come out ahead. Thanks so much for your time and attention.